Good evening. My name is Michael Popa, Executive Director of the Mainstream Coalition, and I'm joined tonight by Julie Passett, our Social Media and Marketing Coordinator. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Michael.
How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And welcome everyone to Continuing the Conversation, an important new series from Mainstream where we'll speak with community leaders and listen as they share their experiences. I know discussing race and racism can be uncomfortable, especially for white people, but we need to get over that. Friends, it's time to let down our guards, set aside our insecurities, and listen, and learn, and most importantly, act. It's only by having these difficult conversations that we're able to move forward together and finally end the systemic racism that continues to plague our society. We're honored tonight to be joined by 3 community leaders and advocates in the Kansas City Metro. And I'd like to introduce them now. Ms. Rachel Russell. Rachel is a fierce community representative with a focus on the power of elevating parent voices to positively transform schools and influence decisions being made for the well-being of children. Professionally, Rachel's a case manager for a local nonprofit serving Opportunity Youth and spends much of her free time serving on local nonprofit boards. Her community organizing motto is, just because it's been done that way before, doesn't mean it has to be done that way now. Hi, how are you, Rachel?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for being here. And we're also joined tonight by LaRon Thompson. LaRon is serving as the pastor of Historical Paseo Baptist Church in Kansas City, Missouri. He has a heart for community and will continue to be a voice advocating for the underprivileged and underserved. He's from Kansas City, Kansas, and now feels honored to serve both KCK and KC Mo. Welcome, LaRon.
Hey, everybody.
Hi. Thanks for joining us tonight, sir.
My honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And then we also have Justice Horn on the panel this evening. Justice is actually at a council meeting at the city of Kansas City. They are voting on an ordinance today that he helps champion out of committee, and it would drop the charges against all nonviolent protesters who were charged. The council was deliberating at 3 o'clock, so hopefully they will finish up shortly and he will be able to join us as soon as he can. He'll just jump on and we will go from there. But right now we're thinking of justice, and we're hoping that some justice does prevail tonight in Kansas City, Missouri. Justice, just to tell you a little bit about him, he is a community leader, public speaker, and social activist. He made history at the University of Missouri, Kansas City's first openly gay multicultural student president. Before his time at UMKC, he broke barriers as the NCAA's first openly gay multicultural college wrestler. Now in politics, he's the youngest political consultant for the LGBTQ branch of the 2020 Joe Biden campaign. He's committed himself to the community as a social justice advocate because of his work on climate justice, civil rights, education, and LGBTQ rights. And please, now let's give a big round, virtually of course, help me welcome Rachel, LaRon, and hopefully soon Justice. So, Rachel and LaRon, what's happening now is not new. In fact, it's always happened since the birth of our nation. Oppression, racism, senseless killing. Why do you think it's such a big deal now? What finally happened that people are listening, people are paying attention? A friend of mine said, Black people have never been more important than they are right now. Why is
Yeah, I think I can take a stab at this one to kick us off. Hashtag we tired. We think about all of the microaggressions, all of the folks we have lost during this fight for justice for Black folks, for Black people, for Black lives. We have reached a point where we don't know whether violent, non-violent, we can't seem to find a way to please people. When we protest Non-violently, it's an issue, such as Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. When we protest next to police officers, it's still an issue, as we see here in Kansas City. I know for myself, I think this one hit home so hard that I find myself reflecting that I can see my children. As a mother of 3, I have 2 daughters, so I see Breonna Taylor in my children, that my children could have been that victim. I see Michael Brown, I see George Floyd in my son, my 1-year-old son. I think as a Black woman, as a mother of Black children, I'm just fed up, and I don't know whether how to continue this fight. And so the way that I continue this fight is this time is going to be the last time. Unfortunately, in the last few weeks, not even after a month after George Floyd, we've seen the death of another Black man. So this protest is not enough. So we are fed up, we are tired.
As well you should be. Ron, do you have anything to add?
I just want to echo the sentiments of Rachel. So much going on for so long, and enough is enough. You know, I feel as though we are at the pinnacle of the plateau of change for Black America and for America as a whole, as we continue to press forward for real systemic. And I think that the millennial generation won't stop until change. We have so many people who are boots on the ground, who are voices, who desire to be heard and are heard. We weren't heard with Trayvon. We weren't heard. We weren't heard with Eric. We weren't heard with Sam. And the list goes on. Now here we are with George Floyd. We heard this time because we are tired. We are tired of being counted as less than. You're tired of being killed like dogs in the street that deserve a chance of life. It's sad that Amy Cooper's dog was treated better than George Floyd was. It's sad when you look at it. So many people called about the way she treated that dog in the park in New York, but very few people had something to say about George Floyd. It's sad, and we have to do something about it, and we will do something about it.
What will we do? What can we do going forward?
I think it just goes to, number one, having conversations like these, but coming together mutually to point out those discriminatory policies, those discriminatory laws that only benefit one particular people group, right? There are policies, there are laws that only benefit a certain group. And I think that should never happen in America. Unfortunately, it's rooted in the DNA, it's rooted in the very fabric of America. And I really feel like we need to pull up those roots. I think about gardening and things like that. When you really want to get rid of weeds, you won't just cut them off the top of the surface. You'll dig the root out of the ground to get rid of those weeds permanently. And I think we really need to dig the roots of racism out. What are the roots? Greed, self, anger, hatred, bitterness. Those are some of the roots that are keeping racism alive in our country. And it's time for us to uproot those things.
Yeah, I would think he's definitely talking to the values and the qualities of what needs to be uprooted. And I think when we talk about those qualities, we also have to talk about a systemic reform. So the systems that are currently in place were not created for Black and Brown communities to succeed. So though what needs to happen to those systems is they need to be taken out, they need to be redone, they need to be restarted. With a different foundation. And I'll probably will talk about this over and over, that I think it really is the systems that we need to reform in order to see change. We need to see in our school systems, our health systems, our employment networks, all of those systems were not created for Black and Brown communities to succeed.
And if I can that, Michael, really quickly.
Please.
We understand the landscape of Congress. If you do your history, there's only been a total of 156 African Americans ever to serve in the United States Congress. Think about that. There are 435 House of Representatives elected every 2 years. And within the history of Congress, there's only been 156 African Americans elected. There's something wrong with that picture. We're not having a voice at the table. We're not able to have give our opinions about the laws and things that are being put in place that directly affect us. And so enough is enough. And I just think we need to do something about it. And let me interject a personal point of preference. I want to thank Kim for being on here as a sign interpreter. I think that's incredible. Thank you so much.
Of course, we appreciate having her. So you mentioned Congress, LaRon, Rachel. You were talking about systemic change. So I personally think, and we talked a little last night, right, just to get to know each other. And we talked a little bit about voting and how I think personally voting is probably our most powerful weapon in this fight, because when your representatives don't look like you, then they don't craft policy that benefits you. And we all agreed on that. There's seems to be, I don't know, some kind of hesitant for people of color, but especially Black people to go to the polls or to cast their vote. I'm not asking you to speak for everyone, but do you know what some of that is?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm like super passionate about. You know, I would never discourage anyone that their vote does not matter, because I do strongly feel like your vote does matter. However, I have heard and I've seen in Black communities, folks get out under the impression that, hey, I'm gonna go win the Black people's vote by saying, hey, I'm gonna put a grocery store in your backyard. I'm going to make your community beautiful. And they get out there, they sell it, and then when they get in office, they don't follow through on their obligations or what they said they were going to do. And I get it. You get in there, hierarchy happens, things, you don't have all the control that you once maybe thought, but you don't ever come back to the community, apologize. You don't ever come back to the community and say, hey, this is still where I'm headed. You kind of just leave us high and dry. And that puts a very bad taste in folks' mouth. The other thing that folks see is that you ask them what they want, and then you don't take that information and utilize it correctly. And that's another area where Black and brown communities feel like, hey, you ask for my input, you do nothing with it, I get out and vote, you don't make change. So, hey, why do it anyway? It's a waste of time. So I would say for me, that is the biggest area where voting is impacted in Black and brown communities, because folks do not follow through.
And I would just add to that, there's a lot of gerrymandering that goes on, a lot of redistricting that happens. I ran for office, public office, this last election cycle in KCK, and some of the things I ran into was, hey, I don't know where my polling place is, or the polling place that I've been voting for the last 12 years has now changed all of a sudden. And so people get disheartened and discouraged because of things like that. How can they just up and change something that has been in existence for me for the past 12 years? That makes me feel as though I don't have a voice, or that my voice is being suppressed. My voice is being suppressed because you're not even considering me when you make these decisions, or not even coming to ask me. I think a good picture of that is the whole debacle we had over here in KC Mo with the Paseo and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. A lot of people just felt as though you didn't even consider my voice. And it is amazing to me. It is amazing to me how when the Caucasian community can come together because their voice was not considered, they are able to change something that could possibly have been a benefit for the Black community.
Very true.
Yeah, and one thing that I would also just add is I think we overall as a Black and brown community, we lack civic engagement education. So what does it mean to change the vote? Justice even talked about last night, just how in some communities it's so powerful to see how the vote really guides the work, the community engagement. It guides how cities and communities come together versus us versus them type of model where that is not seen to be successful in one community that I know of yet. We really want the community and those legislators and those folks that are in these elected positions, because that's exactly what it is. They're elected into these positions to work with the community, not work in silos, not work separately, but work together. And until the community and those in positions of power can come together through that civic engagement education, we more than likely will continue to see the us versus them mentality.
And if I can,
Sure, please, this is.
I just want to add something. You know, in high school or in middle school, we vote for student council president and things like that. I really think in some way we need to find ways to educate our youth about the importance of voting and how that ties into real life after high school, right? Because sometimes student council president is a popularity contest, which sometimes is what politics is in America, popularity contest. And I think that we need to educate them, number one, about the importance of local elections, right? Local elections are tremendously important because it affects you directly. If I had to rank them, it would be local, state, and then federal. And, you know, that's, I would rank the significance of elections. But some people feel like, oh, well, the most important election is the presidential election. And they don't vote. They don't engage in the minor elections, if you will. And so I really think that type of conversation needs to be had starting at the middle school level and engage them early for them to understand, hey, your vote does matter. Your vote does count.
This conversation, this discussion, this idea to have this series, it's been, it's had an evolution over the last couple of weeks since we decided that we wanted to do something, right? And I think I've had a lot of time to sit and reflect, and a couple of things that you both said really hit me. Rachel, earlier you talked about your children, and you both talked about barriers to voting. And those are two things I've never had to experience. I've never had to experience talking to my nieces or nephews and telling them to act a certain way or a different way around different people. I've never had to. I've been able to walk into a polling place and cast my vote every election without problem.
Wow.
I can't relate. And I think a lot of white people can't relate. And there's a sense of, well, shit, then what do I do? You know, I don't know where to go from here. Being a white ally, I don't know the struggle, so maybe I can't help. I'm not trying to make it incumbent on you to teach us and guide us through this, but do you have any advice for us out there, your white allies, on how to best support you right now?
Listen.
Listen is key.
Right. Well, and I will tag on to Michael. I mean, I am a mom sitting in Johnson County with kids in the Blue Valley School District, and my kids don't, you know, they can go ride their bikes, they can go to the pool by themselves, I don't worry about, I've thought a lot about the things we talked about last night. They can go do these things and I don't worry about that. So what do I do sitting here to help? And I don't know the answer to that. And that's a struggle for me to try to figure that out. And I need help with that. I don't know the answer.
Let me ask this question to you, Julie and Michael. How many African-American friends would you consider that you have?
Two good friends.
That I have? Probably one.
Since all this has happened, have you reached out to them?
Yes. And we've had
Um,
these same type of discussions, but so when I had a discussion with my friend Sheila, we talked about voting, and she and another friend of mine kind of shut me down on that and said, you know, it's really hard to get Black people to vote. We need to do something else right now that's big and huge and meaningful. And I was like, sure, I think we do, but we need to keep our eye on the long game too. So my focus has been trying to, I don't know, motivate people to get out to vote. You know, we have a wonderful program on our foundation side, the Voter to Voter Project, where we go into underrepresented communities and we use the power of relationships to talk about voting and how important it is. So I feel that's one thing I can do. What is that big thing that they were talking about that we can do right now that's going to make a meaningful impact? That's what I'm having a problem with, I think.
Yeah, so I'll say that, you know, a lot of my Caucasian friends have reached out to me and they've wanted to sit down and have a conversation. Some of them have taken me out to dinner or invited me over. Let's have a conversation. Number one, I'm concerned about your well-being and your mental health. And then number two, because I want to see how I can help.
Mm-hmm.
I say listen because a lot of times we listen to respond rather than listening to learn. We listen with the intent to respond, and that can be sometimes detrimental in our efforts to seek a way to help and to assist. And so I think the more we move forward and progress, I would encourage any of my Caucasian brothers and sisters to listen with the intent to learn and not with the intent to respond. Because when you do that, you'll find yourself examining you and examining the things in your heart to see, oh, do I have some racist tendencies in my heart? Oh, do I share some of the beliefs that my Black friend is telling me that or they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis? Or do I have those same worries that my Black friend has with their children? And the answer probably 9 times out of 10, you know.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Laurent. Listening is so important. But I also agree yesterday we talked about statements. So I feel like statements are great because silence is very alarming in today's society. So if you're not speaking up about Black Lives Matter, or you're not speaking up about how your organization or your corporation is going to do things differently in this moment, then I have a problem. So statements are great, but listening is also great. But all of those things, so statements and listening, to me, they need to be followed up with action. So what are you going to do? You've listened, you've made a statement, but actions speak louder than words. We all know that. It's one of those basic human statements that we all know. So I'm looking for my white allies to not only be at the protests, taking pictures, saying, hey, I support Black Lives Matter, but you have a privilege that I don't have. You're white. And so what I need you to do is go to those systems and ask for that reform. Julie, we talked a little bit about, like, I need you to go to Blue Valley superintendent and say, hey, what are you doing to help the Black and brown community in our schools? What are you actively doing? Not passive aggressively having a diversity policy or having a statement that says we want to make sure, you know, equal opportunity is provided for everyone, but what are you doing? So I'm making a call to say that I want folks to actively be having conversations with those stakeholders that have the opportunity to make decisions, to spark change, and not just change for the moment, but for a lifetime. Our kids deserve it. We deserve it as Black adults. We all deserve those basic qualities that we all want to have. The other things that I would, something I learned in Kansas Leadership Conference is to get uncomfortable, have uncomfortable conversations, but have intention behind those uncomfortable conversations. Turn up the heat, as Adrian says. I think that's where we are right now. We can no longer be like, I don't want to have this conversation about race because I know that it's going to make Rachel feel some type of way. Rachel will probably be emotional right now. And it's not to pity you or to make you feel overwhelmed. It's because those are real feelings that I have. And we as humans don't like to have those real conversations. We like to kind of put it under the rug. We'll come back to it later. We'll deal with it. This will eventually die down. I don't think this is going to die down. Another thing, as a parent, is white parents having intentional conversations with their kids regarding what's happening. How are they feeling? Could they care less? Are they worried about their Black friends? Have they reached out to their Black friends? Because as Laron said, we're worried about one another, but we also can't carry the burden on our own. So those are a couple other things that I would add.
I have an acronym for that, if I can interject that. It's called Make It Last. Listen, act, support, and teach. Listen to your Black friends, act on the needs that they have, help us in the movement, support the movement, and then teach your children the importance of equality in America. And I think that's so important. So listen, act, support, and then teach.
That's great. That is really, really great.
Mhm.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say, what else do I want white people to do right now? I want white people to support Black-owned businesses. I think we're in a time where we know that Black-owned businesses tend to be the heart of the community in Black and brown communities. So we need our white allies to support those businesses, to empower those folks to think that one day they can have a corporation, they can be big like Sprint and Cerner and all of those things. But also it's important because this is where we are. This is who we are. And we want to know that you're willing to share in that just as much as we have been willing to share in your experiences as well.
It's a great point. I think people forget about the small things, like just supporting Black-owned businesses.
Yeah, I think
there's a definite, that's a concrete step you can take.
Mhm.
I think it's incumbent upon white America, if you will, to support Black businesses, right? After all, America was built on the backs of Blacks. And we helped to create the wealth that now white America is experiencing. And so it's incumbent upon you now to pass some of that wealth along to our communities.
True. Very true.
Mhm.
So this is an uncomfortable conversation. You know, it doesn't come naturally for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I think that's why it doesn't happen a lot. There are two things that we mentioned tonight, or that we touched on, or you talked about. One, I think, is a real sticking point or a real hurdle to overcome is the term, you said privilege, but the term white privilege. It took me a while to actually realize I do have privilege just because of the color of my skin. I hear the word privilege and I think affluent. I think, you know, having power over people. And I'm a middle-class guy, right? Born and raised. I don't have those things, but I can walk into a movie theater, a restaurant, a store, and not be looked at twice, not be refused service, not be shot in my own home. So yeah, I'm privileged. I'm really privileged. It's an uncomfortable term, but I guess to my white friends out there, this is one of those things you need to get over and you need to accept. Because if you don't accept that you have an inherent privilege just because you're white, we can't talk about the rest of this. And I'm just sorry that it took me so long to get there and to get over that.
Can I ask a hard question?
Please, that's why we're here.
Julia or Michael, have you ever profiled a Black or brown individual?
Yes.
Mhm.
I've walked to the other side of the street.
Yeah.
Why?
No reason. No
Yeah.
reason. I mean, there's absolutely no reason. And whether it was, and I've walked to the other side of the street for white people, but yes, I have done it. I have profiled just the way somebody looks, depending on what neighborhood I'm in.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I have this that privilege profiles, right? We profile what we fear or what we've been taught to fear. And simply because we've been taught that, not because we've experienced that,
Mhm.
right? And I think for us now in Black America, we aren't profiling police officers because of what we're taught. We're profiling police officers from what we've experienced, right? We've experienced them pulling us over and beating the mess out of us and treating us crazy. And then we watch videos of Caucasian individuals in their interaction with police officers, and they attack them, and the police officers are running away, not even thinking about using lethal force. And so I think it's important for us to understand. I think somebody said this in the comments on the Facebook page, that it's incumbent upon you guys to use your privilege for greater good, right? It's not, how can I say this? You have the privilege, it's there. But how you use the privilege is up to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I keep coming back to white privilege. White privilege is similar to all lives matter. So I'm not saying that as a Black woman that I don't have privilege in some spaces, but I do recognize in some spaces, I won't ever have the privilege that you have because of the color of my skin. I won't have the opportunity in some spaces because I'm a woman to have privilege in a room full of men. But I think in this moment, exactly what Laurent said, using your privilege for the greater good is what we're asking. We're also asking you to tone that back in some spaces where maybe white privilege has always been, why an organization always has had a white leader is because privilege has not allowed folks of my skin color to be in those type of leadership roles. Privilege, part of that systemic issue, has not allowed for me to see myself up in the ladder. It has not been something that I have been able to kind of just walk into a room and say, oh, I'm going to be the CEO of that company. I know that what I was taught was to respect others. I've had to code mesh. I've had to code switch to be able to get to those places of power or privilege that you kind of just walked into the room and just kindly got with the handshake. I'm asking us to redefine privilege. And sometimes that privilege is taking a step back and allowing others to be present that don't look like you, that are from Black and brown communities.
Great point, Rachel. Great point.
I was laying in bed last night and
Mhm.
I thought, you know what? I think we might be talking. No, we need to have this discussion, and I'm so grateful for it. It's like we might be talking to the wrong people, because you have got to be tired of white people coming up to you and keep asking you to solve our problems, because racism, we caused it. It's our problem. It affects you, but we need to fix it. Right? So when is it too much to keep coming back to you and to keep asking questions? Is there a limit? Are we going to overstay our welcome with that?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to a question that maybe you asked last night that I really thought about. And I've been thinking about, what is it that I want white people to know? And in my millennial mindset and my technology driven world. I was scrolling Instagram and clicking, and I ran across something that I think is really what I think embodies what I want white people to know. So I'm going to take a few moments and I'm going to read it here. Now is the time to understand that supporting the cause isn't about a single period of attending protests and sharing content. It's about making the stance against color-based discrimination a part of your whole being, a part of your day-to-day, where you are conscious of your own actions and words, where you are willing to respectfully point out that a friend, colleague, family member, or anyone else is making a racist remark, where you're not remaining silent and just letting it be. Black people will continue to plead for equality until they feel they've attained it. It's up to the non-Black community to implement that change, because in the end, you are the problem. You have allowed it to reach to this point. So I think, to your very point, that this is not a problem that Black people are going to solve. This is a problem that was created by white people, that needs to be finished by white people, and needs to be solved by white people. We cannot, and I think I said it earlier, we cannot continue to educate you. You have the internet. We have made many videos. We have made many books, written many books about how we can end this. And it's been ignored. So what I would say is, at this moment, at this point, it's time for you to quit asking and do some research. You're on mute, Laron.
Sorry. You know, I would add to that just this thought, that I don't think it's been ignored. I think it's been met with rhetoric such as, if you aren't happy in America, go back to Africa. I think it's been met with rhetoric from 1600 Pennsylvania that you need to go back to S-hole countries, right? And it's as though they don't value our opinion. They don't value our feelings. They don't value our experiences. But when something happens to them, all they have to do is pick up the phone and make a call. And change happens like that. We saw that to be true again with Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper was in the bird park, walking her dog illegally, not on a leash. Chris Cooper called her out, asked her to put her dog on the leash. She called 911 and said, I'm going to tell them that an African-American man is threatening my life. And you saw her escalate through that conversation on the 911 call to make it seem as though her life was in danger, when really she was putting the life of that Black man in danger. And that is disheartening. That is discouraging. But I believe, and maybe this is just me, I think we're done accepting the rhetoric that comes from power. We're going to push for change until we see change come. If you're a Bible reader, it's like Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord, and he said, I'm not going to let go until my change comes. And we're not going to let off the gas pedal until we see real change. We're not going to allow your rhetoric to discourage us. We're not going to allow your rhetoric to dishearten us. We're going to keep pressing until change happens.
I hope you do.
Yeah.
I hope you do.
And I want to be there right beside you. I really do. That's why we're here. I think I said last night, I'm to keep with Bible terms, I'm the sacrificial lamb, or I'm the guinea pig. I'm going to ask all the white people questions that many white people may have. And some of them will be stupid questions. I'm not going to get it perfect, but I want to. And I know a lot of people that want to. So I thank you for just being straight with us tonight.
And I think that's what it's going to take for us to call it what it is. It's going to take for us to have honest dialogue and say, look, you guys have lived on this plateau in this another world for so long. It's time for you to come down here and experience what we're experiencing. I said this last night, and I'll say this again. I've yet to meet one white person who will switch places with me. My life isn't that bad. I've been blessed, but they don't want to switch places with me, because if they switch places with me, when they see a cop car, their heart will start to race. The thought of what's going to happen to me next is going to freak them out. It's a reality for Black people. And some white people don't want to step in our shoes. And I just challenge you to step in our shoes for a day. See what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit last night. Not willing to step in our shoes, not willing to, yeah. So what I'm struggling with is when it comes to sports, we want to support the heck out of some Black athletes.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you willing to trade places with that athlete? Because they still go through the same things we do. Up and down the court, on the field. It's hard. And I'm trying to keep my emotions intact right here. So, but when it benefits the white dominant culture, it's okay. When we can watch you on Sundays, when you make our team good, you want to be a part of our culture. But I'm troubled by the fact that, LaRon, you can't find one white person that will switch shoes with you.
Not one. And I'm a pastor.
Oh, so you got the Golden Gate ticket. So, I mean, I'm willing to switch places, but it doesn't do much for us. Yeah. Something I shared was
the pastor ticket might be hard. Just saying.
Something I shared last night was I recently heard a story of a mom whose son went to USC, and her son was asked, "Oh, you must play sports for USC." And his white best friend attends the same school. And the question is, what is your major? So I know not to switch it up too much, but let's talk a little bit about microaggressions. LaRon, you had a really great point last night around this. How do we address microaggressions as Black people? How do we address microaggressions?
Ooh-wee, I don't remember what my point was last night. Calling them out when they happen. When you hear, I think I remember the point. What we're seeing today in America is, if you are on social media or any platform, you'll see Caucasian children beginning to call out the racist behaviors and the racist rhetoric of their parents. And what that's causing is a divide in their household. On one of the videos, I saw a father put his son out of the house because he called him out for his racist rhetoric and his racist behaviors. And so, I think to Rachel's point, what she said last night, one of the things we need our allies to do is address those microaggressions when we're not in the room. We need to address those comments, those things like that, when there's no Black people in the room. Because what happens is you get in a circle of people where there's no minorities, and we talk about them, and we perpetuate these stereotypes and these ideas of what Black people are, when really you don't even know what we are because you've not taken the time to get to know us. And that's the reality. We need our white allies to address those concerns when we're not present.
Yeah, and I would just follow up with saying, yeah, address them, but then also don't be offended. Don't be offended that I told you, I don't like when you want to touch my hair, or when you ask me How long did that take? It's mine. Like, that's me. I have a 9-year-old daughter that goes to school. During this time, we're embracing our culture. We embraced our culture way before this time, but even more so, rocking the Afro puff. It's not okay to touch Black women's hair or a child's hair, or for your kids to think that they're a Barbie doll. It's not okay. My child doesn't come up to your kid and say, hey, let me play with your hair. That's not how it works. Braids, we all know what braids are. Those are microaggressions that we have somewhat just been like, okay, we're just gonna leave that alone. But as Black people, we have to address those microaggressions. And for white folks, we have to not be offended when we are presented with those microaggressions.
You have to be careful, but you have to be careful though of who you're going to address those microaggressions with, right? Or do you?
I think it needs to be addressed, period.
No, you just as Black people, do you, is it better for someone with privilege, I guess is what I'm asking, because we all know white people have privilege, to address those, or for you to address that with somebody you may not know and you don't know what could happen?
I would appreciate the support of my white allies, but if I don't get it, I'm still going to challenge and correct it. Right? I don't care what arena I'm in. I don't care who's around me. If I know you or not, if I hear you in a manner that is unpleasant and disheartening to my fellow brothers and sisters, I'm going to challenge you on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've passed the comfortable stage. So it's time to no longer do things to make you comfortable, because that continues the systemic racism that we see today. So for so long, we've given you a pass, per se. I'm gonna let you get a pass. I'm gonna let you pass that you said something that maybe you didn't mean for it to be racist, but it truly was racist. I'm gonna give you a pass. Justice yesterday when we talk about Black communities, when our white allies or white folks talk about Black communities, they sometimes reference it as, oh, that's little Africa over there. Or we even do it in, that's little Chinatown over there. Those are racist remarks. And so I think we're past being comfortable, that we have to, even amongst each other, friend, privilege or no privilege, we just have to address it.
And I think it's going to take a while for us to uproot that, because it's just been a part of our society for so long, and we've just become, it's become second nature to us, sometimes first nature, to just respond with those, with those responses. And so, I think it's important that we address it. And that's, like Rachel said, we're beyond being comfortable. It's time out for us to just continue to let it slide in hopes that it's going to change. We've given enough time, and we've not seen the change that we need to see in our communities.
Is there any room for, again, we talked about this a little bit last night. I'm gay. I've experienced this much discrimination compared to what you've experienced. And I can walk down the street and nobody can know that, right? Hope no one say, no, that there's a gay guy. But I forgot my point. I forgot my question, because it was, I forgot the question. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate, I think that, you have your story, Michael, and we have our story. I think what's happening right now is that the light is shining on the Black stories, right? Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Here it is. George Floyd happened not long ago. And here we are again, just last week. Another Black man was shot in his back, center mass, with a bullet piercing his heart. Right? When I watched that video, I'm gonna tell you what I pictured. I pictured a slave trying to run for his freedom. his or her freedom, and the master shooting him and saying, "How dare you desire to be free?" Right? It brought me to tears to see that 27-year-old Rayshard gunned down in the parking lot of Wendy's. But people are going to ask more questions about why the building burned down than they will ask about why the officer shot Rayshard.
Yeah, for 41 minutes, he complied with everything that was asked of him. You asked him to move his car. You asked him to explain where he had been. You had asked him multiple times on some occasions the same question, and he complied. So why did, in 41 minutes, as the DA said today, 41 minutes, 17 seconds, why did it have to end like it did? And then for you to stand over him
and kick him,
and your fellow officer knee him. We're tired. Why does it have to be that way? And this isn't the first time that someone gets shot. He's shot, he's injured, he's not going anywhere. Today, I also watched a video on the NASA page of a man that was gnawed down by a dog. The dog had a good grip on his leg, and there was an officer still trying to keep his foot down, and he was in cuffs. He wasn't going anywhere. We physically know he is incapable of getting anywhere. Why do we think that behavior is okay? I watched another video, a white man on the curb in the hot sun, getting a glass of water as he sat there and waited. We don't see that for Black men. We don't see that for Black women. We see them in the worst occasions ever in their interactions with the police. So I think, to your point, diversity and inclusion is very important. We know there are other minority groups that are trying to be brought up. It's Pride Month. Unfortunately, that is kind of being siloed or silenced because of what is currently taking place. It's an unfortunate, fortunate thing. But we know that you all are also looking for equality in ways that have not been provided to you either. So in this moment, all we're asking is for Black lives to matter. And it's very cliche, we've all heard it. All lives matter when Black lives matter. When I was born, I didn't know what sex I would be. I mean, I didn't know what sex I would prefer to date. I didn't know those things, but I did know the color of my skin. And that's a choice I don't get to change ever.
Yeah, it's very painful reality. And, so many videos are surfacing. I was watching a video of Atlanta the other day. I think it was Atlanta, where there was an officer who held 5 young teenagers at gunpoint simply because they were shadow boxing at gunpoint. And it literally, I felt the pain of the individual who was recording this interaction. She begged for the police officer not to shoot. She begged for the police officer not to harm these boys. And I couldn't help but think, and I keep this on my desk sometimes as a reminder, what if one of those boys would have had this play water gun? That would have been the end of their life. Simply because that police officer was in fear of his life. And we use that as an excuse sometimes because we want to use lethal force. And I think enough is enough. And it's overwhelming emotionally because I think that at any moment that could be me. I am George Floyd. And that's why I appreciate all of the African American NFL players for coming out together and standing in solidarity and saying, I am George Floyd. I matter beyond the football field, right? Because what that did is elevate them to a platform and give them a larger platform saying, hey, these other young boys in America, Black boys, they matter just as much as we do. And we saw the response begin to trickle down after that. You know, Roger Goodell didn't have a choice at that moment, you know, but to give a response because the majority of his players are African American. And we're good enough for you to capitalize off of us, but we're not good enough for you to support us. And that comes to an end in this movement.
Should. And I want you to know, I wasn't making a parallel. And you didn't have to try to assuage any of my feelings there. But thank you for talking to me. I wasn't drawing a parallel. I think I was going toward that grace that we talked about last night. People don't always know what to say. We're going to make mistakes. Engagement is better than perfection. To that point, some people won't even get over this. I've heard a few different words tonight: Black, African American. Now we have communities of color, people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. What is correct? I mean, this is really like to start the conversation, because some people won't even have the conversation because of this little thing. What's correct?
I'm gonna ask you, Michael, are you white or are you European?
I'm white.
Okay. I'm a Black man. I think that the term African American has racial or racist undertones to it because it implies that I belong in Africa. When I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, at Menor Hospital on June 20th, I have every right to be in America. I have every right. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. I have every right to be here. I'm a Black man. I think the song says I'm Black and I'm proud. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, the only piece that I would add is, and I apologize, I'm spinning in the chair. Know your audience, know who you're talking to. When I'm around my grandparents, I'm not sure that they would say that this land is theirs. They grew up during a very hard time. So they prefer to be referred to as African Americans because they know that their ancestors did not want to be here. But I also know in this time, during this movement, when I'm out and about, I'm embracing my Blackness or my melanin. The fact that the sun hits me different than it hits you. And you want to try so hard. That's why you go to the tan booth to embrace this melanin I've been embraced with. So I think that's a very hard question to ask, but you truly have to know your audience, know who you're talking to. Young people, like Laron said last night, there are some bad names that you could kind of use to address them because they have melanin popping and Black, and they use many different things to identify their Blackness. But in this moment, Rachel is a Black woman. Any other time, yes, I will still check mark that box on applications or on things that say, are you African American, Caucasian? I'm still African American, but right now I'm Black and I'm proud.
And we have to, as white people, we can't take offense if you correct us, right? Like we can't take offense. We're asking, we didn't know, or we've said the wrong thing. But like you said, it's time that you stop giving us passes.
Right, because I was taught to say African American growing up. If I need to change, I need to change, and I need to be told that.
Yeah, I just think it goes back to what Rachel said is knowing your audience and you know, in certain settings, people do call us African American. On most applications, there is only African American, not Black. But you know, I ultimately, let me say this, and I think I said this last night. I don't care what you call me, as long as you value me. As long as you value who I am, as long as you feel as though I am your equal and not subservient to you, I don't care what you call me. You can call me African American, you can call me a Black, just don't call me a nigga. Right? I just want to feel valued in this place where I've grown up in, where my ancestors helped to build this place. I want to feel valued. And I think that's the desire of many people in our culture, in my culture. We want to be valued. We don't want to be counted again as 3/5 of a person. We want to matter, and we want to matter to everybody. We matter to us, but we want to matter to you.
Yeah, and I would just add, alongside being valued, I don't want to be valued because I present myself as the Black expert at your table. I want to be valued that we're equals here. A lot of organizations, as we see diversity and inclusion be a trend almost, we see Black women in those positions because they add value, because they meet that quota of, we have a Black person in leadership, but their main role is to support making sure that we're a diverse workplace. I want to add value in a way that you feel like you add value to the table. I think that's very, very important. And I am very cautious when I get in a room where, yes, my voice is being heard, but I'm the only person that looks like me in that room. That goes back to saying, no, you handpicked me, or you said, oh, if we add Rachel, we meet, oh, she's under 30, oh, she's Black, oh, she has a different, her family tradition is different. I'm a single mother of 3. Like, I add value because you like what I bring to the table, not because you're check marking a box.
Right, you want to be the right person for the job.
Yeah, and I would say just add value to us in positions of authority. If you look at the landscape of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, there's not one African American in the hierarchy of leadership in the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. That's a crying shame. We don't have a chief that's Black, assistant chief that's Black, a captain that's Black. They in no way can relate to our experiences as African Americans or Black people. They're not Black. And so we need, like Rachel said, we need to be valued enough to be considered for those positions.
I could talk to you all night, but I know we can't. So I'd like to end here for now and invite you back at a later date to continue this conversation. And hopefully I'll be telling you, and Julie will be telling you some things that we've done to support you, not ask you how to support you. I value you guys, and it's not just because you're Black, but because you're pretty awesome human beings.
Yeah.
From
I
what
thought you were saying I was pretty, so I was going to take that too.
and you're pretty.
He's
No, I was talking to you, LeRon.
Hey, don't let him burn.
You guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. Honored to have you on with us. And that invitation was real. I'd really love to come back and talk with you again. LeRon?
I just want to say one last thing, and I'm inspired by the quote. It's a quote that I live by. Gandhi said this: you must be the change you wish to see in the world, right? You got to be uncomfortable. You got to be willing to accept reality. And I tell my congregation this all the time. God puts us in uncomfortable places, not so we feel bad, but so that we grow. And I think now is an opportunity for America to grow tall enough to wear the crown that it wants, it should be wearing, if you will, right? And so I'm grateful for this conversation, Michael, Julie, Kim, Rachel. This conversation is important. This conversation is necessary. And it should not be just a conversation when the life of an African American is taken. This conversation needs to continue beyond that. And I want to be a part of that. And so when everything passes over with COVID, you can come to my church anytime and let's have a conversation.
All right.
I would love that. And I honestly, this has, I can think of 2 incidences in my life that I have thought back on that I have regret not stepping up and saying things. And I am gonna do something. I can't change those situations, but I can change going forward. And I'm gonna figure out what I can do. And I'm super glad that I've met you two and have been a part of this. So
I would encourage you to use that as fuel for change and not fuel for condemnation, right? Because hindsight is 2020.
yeah,
When we look, we can say, I should have done this. But I encourage you to use those experiences as fuel to produce change.
definitely.
Thank you again, guys. Will you stay around? Don't jump off the Zoom yet. When we stop the live feed, I'd love to just wrap up with you offline. And thanks, Julie, for being with us tonight as well. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I hope you also join the next conversation in this series with Loretta Summers next Tuesday at 1 p.m. And we're going to be diving into white privilege and unconscious bias. We're going to continue to be uncomfortable. So please visit mainstreamcoalition.org to view other upcoming events in this series and learn more about our body of work. And remember, like I said at the beginning, listen, learn as we have tonight, and then act. Please stay safe. And remember to do more than vote with Mainstream in 2020. Good night.